and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben, and with me is
Jim, the Jimster.
And look, I don't think it's fair to name you after anyone in this movie, so...
Yeah, I noticed I didn't do it to myself either. I was like, no.
And this week we did, after some confusion, which I think is apt for this movie, The Disaster Artist.
So we struggled on the end of last cast. We tried to watch The Room from 2003, the infamous The Room, which was written and directed and everything by Tommy Wiseau.
I had a look at the Wikipedia just before, and it's like written, produced, directed, starring Tommy Wiseau. Like it's just everything Tommy Wiseau.
But obviously we were unsuccessful, and so instead we ended up watching The Disaster Artist. Now, I will say that in the week since we've looked at this, I did find a physical copy of The Room on Amazon, and after watching The Disaster Artist.
You bought it?
Actually, because I'd seen it before. I didn't buy it, but I added it to my wish list. It was like, I was like, I think because it was one of those tricky ones as well, because it's kind of expensive because it's imported. Yeah. And then it's also a case of, hey, this probably won't play in your region. But I was like, look, I think I might need this though. Like,
it's interesting from someone who didn't really know what they were getting into with The Room. I think this movie has done a fantastic job of priming you for it. So
yes, absolutely. So look, why don't I dive in and I'll give us a synopsis of The Disaster Artist and we can go from there. So
let's go.
The Disaster Artist is a biographical comedy drama film directed by and starring James Franco, based on the memoir by Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell. It chronicles the friendship between aspiring actor Greg Sestero, played by Dave Franco, and the enigmatic, eccentric filmmaker Tommy Wiseau, played by James Franco. The story follows their journey to create The Room from 2003, a notorious bad yet good cult classic film. The film explores themes of ambition, creativity, and the fine line between passion and delusion as Tommy's bizarre behavior and unconventional methods lead to a chaotic production process. Despite the mockery The Room initially received, it ultimately became beloved as a so bad it's good masterpiece. At its heart, The Disaster Artist is a quirky celebration of chasing dreams and the unlikely bonds forged in the process.
Released 2017, directed by James Franco, written by Scott Neustadter and Michael H. Weber, based on The Disaster Artist, as you said, by Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell, starring James Franco, Dave Franco, Seth Rogen, Alison Brie, Ali Gaynor, Josh Hutcherson, and Jackie Weaver. Budget of $10 million, box office of $29.8 million. Before we kick off, fun fact, early one. So this movie, The Disaster Artist, cost $10 million. Rumors say the original Disaster Artist, The Room, cost $6 to $8 million to make, just because of the pure inefficiency of the process and filming, double filming, and filming behind the scenes and all that sort of stuff. So yeah,
I gotta say, look, I had seen The Disaster Artist before. I had not seen The Room, but I'd seen The Disaster Artist. Oh, really? So you're the opposite, are you? So you had seen The Room, right?
Yeah.
Well, how did you see it?
I saw it when I was at uni. So I went to uni for film and television production. One of the times I went to university, and one of the kids there was obsessed with it. I say kids because I was very much an adult when I went to the uni. And we all watched it with him. He put it on the projector at school and we watched it together. Wow. And it was very, very fun to watch as part of a group. I think, honestly, it's got to be the best way to do it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, obviously, I've heard about and even before we did this little experiment, I'd heard about the midnight screenings and the global tours and people acting out bits of it as they watch it. And that does definitely sound like a fun way to view the movie. And so when I look at that idea of, like I said to you at the start of the podcast, I'm like, I've seen a DVD on Amazon. I'm like, yeah, but do I want to watch it that way? Like, isn't that not part of the charm that you're supposed to watch it like in a huge crowd and enjoy it and all that sort of thing? So I am torn as to whether I actually see it. Because yeah, watching this one, like watching the room by yourself at home on DVD,
I think it's
I
kind of
just,
sad.
yeah, it doesn't seem like the way to go. So, but look, The Disaster Artist, I think, is a great movie. Let's just sort of get that out up front.
I
So,
actually think it's really good.
yeah,
For a subject matter that is quite odd, and for a style of movie we haven't tackled before on this podcast, that kind of documentary dramedy kind of thing, it is fantastic. And look, I actually think it's real similar to the previous movie you watched, The Muppet Movie, because these people are crazy caricatures of humanity that I know for a fact really exist, which is nuts.
yeah, it's crazy. Like, and while I say I had seen The Disaster Artist before, it was a while ago. It was when it first came out, somewhere around that 2017 mark. And there are a number of things this time that I guess I picked up that I either didn't clock the first time around or, just didn't remember. And one of them, which I keep returning to, is this idea that I didn't realize or remember that Tommy decided to shoot this movie in a dual format.
Yeah.
I was like, that to me is crazy. So they had what seems like two cameras going, one shooting 35 millimeter film and another one shooting high definition, cinematic video. But they did it simultaneously next to each other, because he didn't understand the process and that you shot one and not the other one. Now, I found out, since in my research, they only ended up using the 35 millimeter one, which makes total sense for the time. But yeah, that's a level of redundancy and inefficiency that is somewhat boggling to actually shoot the same content in multiple formats. You're doubling. I don't know it, and
Does
then to
that does
buy
that
the
strangely
equipment.
enough give that movie extra life, possibly in the future, having both those formats existing?
I'd say unlikely because, as they say in the film, you light them very differently. So again, I'm guessing they lit for 35 millimeter because that was certainly more common at the time. And the other thing is, 2003, the digital video that we're talking about
Not good.
is so early. We're talking even prestige filmmakers we're still getting some artifacts and some difficulty with that format, like Michael Mann and Collateral and that sort of thing, which I think was somewhere around 2004. Like still seeing some tricky stuff at night. So yeah, look, I think it literally is just a waste of money. Like
Yeah, okay.
there's no two ways about it. That was a waste of money to
Both
do it that way.
manpower and format.
Exactly. So, but it is also, it's a super interesting movie because as a character study, as this idea that Tommy is someone who actually has the means somehow to do this. The idea that no one knows where his money came from, but he has the money. He can actually spend $6 million on whatever this was. That's the
Not just
part.
spend $6 million comfortably, seems to comfortably be able to spend $6 million. Like it has
Yeah.
no detrimental effect to him.
And I think that's probably the part, the mystery of Tommy Wiseau is probably where I feel like I should watch The Room. I should read The Disaster Artist now because he is a figure that is so fascinating in this movie. Now, not necessarily nice, I should say, like
No.
as presented in the film, like he does some things that are quite awful, to many people, and certainly not, I want to be careful and say not a
He's not a
character.
hero.
He's not a hero. He's not someone to be celebrated,
No.
but he is definitely a figure of interest, to actually look at.
To me, he's almost like a human cryptid. He is mythical. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't make sense. Like if someone say, "Hey man, I saw a Tommy Wiseau sighting," you'd go, "Whatever, man. Like it's just a dude who looks like Tommy Wiseau." Like the mystery of him. Like this is where I became obsessed after watching this movie. I'd known about Tommy Wiseau. I'd looked him up before, But the idea that people still didn't know anything about him, I actually was very skeptical. They still don't know anything about him.
Yeah.
Like, it is all the information conflicts. It all comes from him or Greg. Like, they've narrowed down roughly where he's from, which is Poland, but they don't know. They reckon he was born roughly in 1955, but they don't know. And they absolutely do not know where he got his money from. Like, there are like theories of like he was hit by a car from a rich person, so he got a huge settlement. There's like he somehow got involved in clothing importing early and leather jackets and made his money that way. Like, it's literally insane that in this day and age people cannot definitively dig up where this human being came from and where his money came from. Like, the people say they've seen his birth certificate or seen his like immigration certificates, but nobody has shown them to anybody or proved it from anybody. Some people say he's from Louisiana with his family, but maybe he has an uncle there. They're not sure. Like, it is great. Like, I'm literally going insane right now speaking about it. Like, it bugs me so much that we don't know who this human being is.
Particularly in the internet age, it's like, how does that happen? How does it
Like,
happen?
we know roughly, like we know roundabouts things, but we don't know.
And that's a huge part of the draw of the movie, is this mysterious figure at its center. And what is this person? Who is this person? And how has this person gone out and just done this thing? But at the same time, we've talked about this idea of auteur theory. Like, now you've said, you studied film at uni. You made me feel very old, can I just say, because I also studied film at uni, but well before you did.
And we're the same age.
And we're the same age. So literally when I was studying, film at uni, this movie was being released, shall we say. It was like literally 2 years, I think, after the premiere that we look at in this particular film. So look, it was not known at the time when I was going through, uni and studying film, but he goes and he makes the film. And you and I have talked about auteur theory before on this podcast. And this is going to make people mad. I don't even care, because it's true. If you look at what is auteur theory, it is
Pure.
this is pure. It is pure auteur theory. It is the idea that this movie could only be made by this person, and the unique set of circumstances that go into the production process can't be replicated and are only able to be viewed this time. This is a unique product that only exists in this form. And you look at it and you just go, well, actually, this is the purest kind of auteur theory that you're going to see.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's good, but in terms of something that is unique, and it is, without having seen the room, which, I must see somehow, it does seem like that is what people respond to about the room. It's like, it's different, it's unusual, it's makes no sense, but it's unable to be witnessed anywhere else. And it is just that example of, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it, and we will see what happens. And it is a huge swing too. Like, there's so much to respect in saying, well, we did it. We put it out there. We put out a product. And that happens in every movie, I should say. But this time, there was a lot on the line in terms of credibility, reputations, and this bad movie is now so notorious that that the production team have been able to embrace it, which is just so rare, because obviously this was a disaster, as it says.
We haven't spoken about it yet, but I'd like to. The performances in the film, mainly the DeFranco brothers. Obviously, James provides a very, very good caricature in this film, like a character study of a human being who is very odd. And I think where he nails it most is mannerism and kind of like facial expression. Like, yes, he does like the voice, but in this film, when he's kind of looking at people as Tommy Wiseau, it is hauntingly captured, in my opinion. Like, you kind of stop looking at it as DeFranco, or not, sorry, not DeFranco, Franco playing that, and it looks like Tommy Wiseau to me partway through this film. And then without his brother Dave being this weird kind of gentle anchor for most of the film, this movie would fly off into space. You
Mm.
need that character of Greg, who was obviously a real person, presented in this story. And it's really interesting. Like, playing people who are still alive, who are going to watch this movie, who are actually in this movie, both of them, it must be really hard. You must be feel watched in a way that you don't normally when you're an actor.
Yeah, and it is unusual. And Dave Franco's performance, who is really the audience surrogate,
Yeah.
he's us going, what on earth is going on? And I actually wonder, while we've got lots of footage of Tommy, do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Being Tommy and interviews and things like that. It's interesting because I wonder how close Dave Franco's portrayal of Greg actually is to the real life, Greg Sestero, because obviously he seems totally grounded, totally down to earth, totally normal in the movie by design. That's what the character's supposed to be. But at the same time,
He couldn't have been.
this is a young man who, I don't know, moved halfway across the state with a 50-year-old man who he
With an
met recently,
indeterminately aged human.
who then stuck with him through the entire production process and, was treated terribly and yet hung around. Like, there are a lot of things when you actually look at not the characterization, but simply the actions of Greg Sestero in this film where you say, yeah, but how normal are you? Like, this sounds terrible. This is a real person. I'm not trying. I'm not trying to be, but I'm just saying, like,
You're a few screws short, mate. Like, seriously.
you know what I'm saying, right? Like, it's because in the movie he's portrayed as just so normal because he's the audience surrogate. Yet at the same time, the choices the character makes, and whether or not maybe some of those choices aren't perhaps genuine, because of course this is an adaptation as well. It's not necessarily beat for beat really what happened, which we might get to as well, because there's a couple of things that I think were good choices in terms of an adaptation. But yeah, it is just interesting that Greg is presented as so normal to contrast Tommy, yet when you actually look at his bank of decisions, it's like these are kind of very different and unusual as well.
Well, their initial relationship in this movie is presented kind of cult-like. Like, people have mentioned the Master in talking about, like, Tommy seemed to have a spell over Greg, and he seemed to kind of just like, Greg looks at him as if he's weird, but he keeps saying yes.
Yes.
And that is very much like, there's like this kind of like, there's a joke in the movie when he's writing the film where he's like, Johnny is this, Johnny is that, maybe vampire, I don't know yet. Like, it's kind of like that mesmer kind of attitude. And, it shows that, at least as presented in the film, Greg was a character who was looking for an answer, and for some reason he found that answer to begin with in Tommy. He found this person who wasn't on this planet, who was on planet Tommy, who did what they wanted, basically gave him a way to break the barriers that he felt he was behind. It was a weird way to break those barriers. It was this strangely self-confident, strangely not confident man who walked through the world as if nobody else existed. And yeah, you get this kind of cultish leader for, at least, as I said, the first kind of half of this film, where for some reason Greg keeps saying yes. And you talk about sources, right? It is odd because basically we've got a source written by Greg that has been adapted again, which means more changes have been made. So yeah, our narrator is 100% unreliable
Yeah.
because of the journey it's taken. But as far as like how close or accurate, I mean, obviously we've got footage of Greg in the film, interviews behind the scenes all exist. Also, like the cast and crew of this film have been interviewed to death over the years, and I think they were interviewed and for this film as well. So I mean, people would have got the idea of what Greg was like behind the scenes, and I think we see a bit of that, the apologist, the person who's trying to hide the insanity that is Tommy to everybody else in a strange way, or excuse it at least. But yeah, like Dave does a great job.
And I think I'd like to read The Disaster Artist
Mm,
because, again, as presented in the film, there's not much conflict between Tommy and Greg, and I feel like in real life, surely there was more, you know,
yeah.
and in a weird way, much as you had the idea of conflict, that would actually make me feel better if there was
Yeah.
more conflict between the two, particularly from the perspective of Greg and trying to get him through. But the other thing I do want to talk about a little bit is adaptation, because there's some stuff that is simply history, and you can tell what they've done in terms of their adaptation. And one of those things that I think was a really good choice was the idea to contract time regarding the film's premiere. So that is a sequence which serves as the finale of the
Yeah.
film, and they take a process that actually in real life took months and years, which was for the film to be firstly completely panned and absolutely, you know, abhorred by people, and then to actually
Be found.
be found by its audience and to turn into this cult film, this cult classic, which was seen as a so bad it's good comedy. And of course, it takes that entire journey, and then it also takes Tommy and Greg's reaction to that journey, which also took years.
Yeah.
Um, and it puts it all into one big night where the start of their premiere is the negative reaction, and by the end of that single premiere screening, both Tommy and Greg have come around to what they've made, and the audience is loving it because of the so bad it's good nature of the production. And while that's perhaps in some ways it doesn't highlight the struggle of this film's distribution arc and what the cast went through, it is a nice moment of triumph as a movie
Yeah.
for The Disaster Artist.
It's interesting. I don't know if whether it's in the book or not, but I was reading that Greg spoke about that, and he was saying that like, yeah, it was painful when it was released. Like nobody liked it. It got hammered. It was released in one theater and made like $1,000. And the only reason it was released in a theater is that Tommy wanted to be considered for the Academy Awards. Um, and he only realized it was funny when his family and friends watched it privately and laughed at it. And then he's like, oh, okay, there's some value here. At least my friends and family can laugh at this or whatever. And then, yeah, you're right. It took a year or two for people to kind of find this film. And to be fair, if this wasn't made by Tommy Wiseau, who pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, nobody would have found it. It would have died like a million other auteur self-produced projects that people make because they give up. But he didn't give up. He strangely pushed through, and yes, he had to adjust, and Greg had to adjust to what this film was, because they definitely didn't make it as a comedy, no matter what the rewrite of their history, or at least Tommy's history, says. They made this as a serious film, but it is this serious film of a madman. Like, and it connects with people in a way because everyone's watched a movie, and you, whether you realize it or not, you know the rules of what a movie should do and how it should be constructed and how it should be acted at a minimum. So when your brain is presented with The Room, it's actually this kind of jarring moment where your brain has to choose to accept it as comedy because that's the only way it can view it, right? It's the only way it can make sense of what it's seeing because it doesn't follow those rules, whether you know them or not.
And I love what you say there about the idea of rules. Like, I know that a lot of, you know, young filmmakers struggle with the idea of, oh, I can't make that, I don't know what to do, or
Yeah.
might start to look at the idea of, oh, you can't do it that way, you're not allowed to do it that way. And it's like, actually, you can do whatever you want. You can. There's no one out there stopping you. And in that sense, it's incredibly inspiring to say the only barrier to stop you from producing something. Now, the modern version of this might be, yeah, but it's shot on your iPhone and you don't have good sound and you don't have real lighting,
Mm.
but you can do it. There's
Yeah.
actually nothing stopping you from doing it except yourself to say, I can't do it, And it could be weird and odd, and if no one's there to help you, maybe you're playing all of the characters, but it is possible to do it.
Yeah.
It's not that there is literally no barrier to making a movie, and this experience of the room proves that you can do it. Now, of course, at the time when this came out, it cost $6 million, and they weren't using an iPhone, but times have changed, right? So I think the inspiration factor for this one is high. And even, look, this podcast that we're doing,
Yeah.
while it seems on the surface like the easiest thing to produce, and look, I'm not going to say it's difficult in the sense that it's $6 million of our own money that we're spending on to do this podcast. And yes, our lighting could be better, and yes, our sound could be better, but we got up at 4:30
5 a.m.
this one that we
Yeah.
shot today, to try and meet our weekly schedule, which no one imposed on us except ourselves. Like, we want to produce this weekly show, and we got up at I got up at 4:30 so that I could be here for 5 o'clock, just because there was no other time to shoot it. So there is a sacrifice to making anything, is really all I want to say there. And the idea that there was a sacrifice of time and of money to create this notorious product of The Room, there's something to respect there. There's something to look at. And I guess there's also a flip side of it to say, what a waste of money. Six
Yeah.
million bucks on this, like, how many people could we have fed with that? So there's also sort of that flip side, which is worth acknowledging. And that's very, very difficult to then quantify with any art piece. At the same time, it has made its money back over the intervening
More than
years.
so. Like,
So
it's
good investment, maybe.
yeah, no, like, it wasn't. It was a lucky investment.
Yeah.
Because they pivoted. They changed what they were doing with it because they realized there was a market, or somebody realized there was a market and told them. And with this film as well, like, we haven't spoken about it. I really do enjoy the shot for shot
Mm,
remake parts of the film, and they emphasize that towards the end of the film at the credits, where they show you the original and the remake side by side, and the only thing really out is a small amount of timing. Like, it's very impressive what they've done, and people would say, well, what's so impressive about remaking a bad movie? Like, it's kind of like art forging. Like, it's not the easiest thing to do, especially with lighting, camera position, sound, acting, performances, set design. Like, that's hard to do, and they do it so well in this movie.
absolutely. And with that idea of the remake, there's a quote that I want to pull out from this film. So, and it's from Jackie Weaver's character, who's not in the movie very much, but
Australian represent.
yeah, there you go. So, but it's this idea that where Greg says to Carolyn, which is after she fainted on set. This is the character
Yeah.
who's the older lady. Do you know what I mean, in the movie? And Greg says, "Can I ask you something? Why do you do it? You've got a husband, grandkids. You live 50 miles out of town. You're waking up at 5. You're driving all this way for what?" And she says, "We're actors, Greg. For you, me, people like us, even the worst day on a movie set is better than the best day doing anything else." And I think about that quote, and that quote was with me the first time I watched The Disaster Artist, and it definitely stood out to me again, which is the idea of, how do you get all these people to make this? it's that idea that there's something intoxicating about filmmaking where people are willing to do all of these crazy things just to be part of it.
But we also have tangentially existed in that world in one way or another. We know those people.
Mm,
We know the person who will drive to New South Wales, get paid in lunch, and be on a movie set. We know those
yes,
people. We've
yes,
met those people. Like, those people exist. And you're right, there is this mystique around film. There is this magic that exists in the art form of creating cinema. It exists in plays too, like community theater, all that sort of stuff. You know, if you have a local community theater you've seen the same actors every single time. Now here's the worst or the more impressive part. The same people are behind the scenes that you never see as well. There's the
yes,
same stage director. There's the same costume designer. These people don't get paid. They do it for the magic and the love of the industry that they want to be a part of. And that The Disaster Artist is a perfect example of. Even though a lot of people were angry during the making of the film, even though a lot of people were like treated bad during the making of the film, they showed up until the film was complete.
mm,
And some of that would have been money. They were being paid, but wow, yeah. It is that love. It is that obsession with the
yeah.
craft.
So look, it remains a an enigmatic movie, and I do think that now it's somewhat urgent that I watch The Room in some way. But of course, it's now a white whale, Ben. I can't just, rent a cinema and get 200 people who are The Room fans to go watch it with me. I got to wait for one of
Uh,
these events. I got to keep
what
my ear to the ground. I got to get out there.
I know a lot of friends of ours would probably watch it. So we could recreate the experience in a mini format, possibly.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe we should. So, but look, until we do, why don't you tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find our magical product? And then I am very curious as to what you have for us for next week.
So, thank you so much for listening. You can obviously find us on YouTube, but you can also find us on iTunes and Spotify at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. You can find us on social media on TikTok at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. Now, quick PSA. TikTok might be kind of changing or going away, depending on what happens in the US of A. So, look, if we have to move to something else or change, we'll let you know. Instagram, Jim _and_ Ben. You can check out what we post there as well. Now, I struggled with a follow-up movie to this. And I figured I had kind of two options, right? I could try and build off of it, which is insanity in itself. Or I could try and go a completely different direction, or I could try and just go watch something I wanted to watch, or, there were all these different things. So I did have trouble with this. But I do have like a little master list of movies that I kind of just smashed out when we first started this podcast. And, looking at some of them, I'd never watch them. They don't fit the vibe, at least at this point in time. And there are a couple that are just like really left field or would be painful for me to watch. I don't know why I even wrote them down. So I'm going to choose a movie, and I'm looking at the list right now. I haven't chosen. So let's do this. We're going to watch. I've got it. We're going to watch my personal favorite movie in a series of movies. There are many movies in this series, and after this one was released, many people said that's probably the end of this series. We're going to watch Too Fast, Too Furious.
That actually is a surprisingly good follow-up to The Room.
It kind of just clicked in my head just then. So it is the second Fast and the Furious movie. A lot of people would call it the forgotten Fast and the Furious movie. Between this and Tokyo Drift, Tokyo Drift just happens to be a much better movie. So next week we're watching Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious.
Love it. I know a lot about this film.
I know you do, so I won't have to do a lot of work.
All right. Well,
Pockets ain't empty, bruh.
That'll make sense next week. See ya.
Bye.